So let's talk about Louisville, Kentucky. You might not think of it this way, but this one city is like a perfect snapshot, a microcosm really, of the entire American story. We're going to dig into how its really deep and often divided past is crashing right into a brand new global future.
Okay, so to really get where Louisville is going, we've got to start with a number. And it's a big one. 11,000 years. I mean, think about that. That's how long people have been continuously living right on this one spot on the Ohio River. And a history that deep, well, it changes everything.
Which really brings us to the big question we're tackling in this explainer. How does a city's history, with all the good, the bad, and the ugly, how does that actually shape its future on a global scale? Believe me, Louisville's story has some, pretty powerful and honestly surprising answers.
So the first thing you need to know about Louisville, it has always been a city shaped by waves of migration. This is a story of people constantly on the move, and it started way, way before any Europeans ever showed up. And this is where we have to bust a big myth. You might have heard this idea of Kentucky as a dark and bloody ground, this empty, wild place that was just for hunting. Well, it's just plain wrong. The archaeology, the actual evidence, tells a totally different story. A story of permanent, sophisticated communities. And you can really see how things evolved over time here. It starts way back with Paleo-Indian hunters, tracking actual mammoths. Then you get to the Archaic period, and they're setting up semi-permanent camps. Fast forward to the Woodland period, and boom, you've got gardening, you've got pottery, and then it all culminates in the Mississippian period with these big, complex farming villages and huge trade networks. This wasn't just a hunting ground. This was a thriving civilization. Okay, so jump forward thousands of years, and a totally different wave of people arrives. We're talking the 1840s and 50s. Huge numbers of European immigrants, mostly from Germany and Ireland, start pouring into Louisville. They were running from famine, from political chaos back home, and they were about to completely change the face of the city.
And the scale of this change, it was just staggering. I mean, look at these numbers. In 1820, Louisville is this tiny town. But by 1852, the population just explodes. And get this, more than a third of the people living there were German. These weren't just new faces. They were the engine, the labor force that literally built the city's canals, its railroads, its whole industrial base.
But as you can imagine, that kind of rapid change didn't happen without some serious conflict. It all came to a head on a day that got a grim name, Bloody Monday. A political party basically built on fear of Catholic immigrants just unleashed a wave of violence. And that day, it set this really painful pattern for the kinds of tensions, cultural, racial, that would haunt Louisville for the next 100 years.
Right, so as we move into the 20th century, the city's divisions, they don't just happen. They were engineered. They were created by design through very specific policies that left deep scars you can still trace on a map today.
And the most powerful tool for this was something called redlining. Here's how it worked. Back in the 1930s, the government literally drew maps coloring in neighborhoods based on how risky they were for investment. But let's be real. Risky was just code for race. If you lived in a black neighborhood, it got a red line drawn around it. And that meant you were cut off from getting loans, from getting mortgages, basically from any chance of building wealth that you could pass down to your kids.
And those maps from 1937, they basically became a blueprint for the inequality we see right now. The neighborhood's color of green and blue, mostly in the white East End, got all the investment and property values went through the roof. But the red areas, the ones in the black West End, they were deliberately starved of money. And that leads directly, a straight line, to the vacant lots and disinvestment you can still see there today.
So by the time we get to the 1970s, the fight over segregation moves. It shifts from housing and onto a new battleground, the schools. In 1974, a federal court steps in. It orders the city schools, which were mostly black, and the county schools, which were mostly white, to merge. And the tool they decided to use to create racial balance? Busing.
Now, the idea was to create equality, right? But the reality was way more complicated and incredibly divisive. It was met with violent protests. It kicked off a huge white flight with families moving to the suburbs or pulling their kids into private schools. And here's a crucial point. The burden of all this travel fell heaviest on black students. They were often bused for 10 years compared to just 2 for white students. This one policy completely reshaped this city for decades to come.
Which brings us to right now, because another huge demographic wave is hitting the city. And this one is totally changing the game, reimagining what Louisville's future could even look like. It's turning into a completely new kind of global crossroads. Okay, this chart right here, this is the key to understanding what's happening in Kentucky today. Look at that first bar. In 2024, more people actually died in the state than were born. So, wait, how is the population growing at all? The answer is right there in the middle, international migration. It's not just part of the growth, it is the growth. Without it, the state would be shrinking.
And here's the thing. Louisville isn't just sitting back and watching this happen. The city is being incredibly intentional about it. They've put a strategy in place to actively attract immigrants and refugees, even getting certified as a welcoming city. They see this as an absolute lifeline for their economy and for their future.
And just look at how diverse this new wave is. The biggest group, by a long shot, is from Cuba. So many, in fact, that Louisville is now the #2 spot for Cuban resettlement in the entire U.S. The only city with more is Miami. But it's not just Cuba. You've got large, vibrant communities from the Congo, from Afghanistan, from Haiti, from Syria. It's a truly global mix.
And this is where you can really see history kind of rhyming, you know? Just like those German and Irish immigrants in the 19th century were the muscle behind the industrial boom, today's immigrants are a huge engine for the modern economy. They make up almost 9% of all entrepreneurs in the city and over 7% of all workers in science, tech, engineering, and math.
So, all of this, it brings us to the core challenge facing Louisville right now. On one hand, you have this city trying to build a global, welcoming future. But it's trying to build it on a foundation that's deeply scarred by decades of deliberate division. So the question is, how on earth do you make those two things work together?
And this really says it all. The big challenge is trying to reconcile that red line legacy with the welcoming city ambition. Because think about it, you can't really succeed in welcoming new people from around the globe if the old wounds from local divisions haven't even begun to heal.
The good news is the city isn't just talking about it, they're taking real concrete steps. They're investing in programs to tackle bias head-on. They're using smart tools like community land trusts to stop residents in historically black neighborhoods from being pushed out by new development. And at the same time, they're planning strategically to keep growing their global population. It's like this three-part plan: heal the past, protect the present, and build the future.
And that leaves us with one last really big question. Louisville, in so many ways, is a test case for the entire country. It shows us just how tangled up our past is with our present. The future isn't set in stone, of course, but it makes you wonder, can any city, can any country really build a new, truly inclusive future without first facing the ghosts of its past? Can we ever really escape our own history?